Hey everyone, work-life balance, huh? It's something we all think about, especially when we're in leadership roles, like a lot of you nurse execs out there. So we're doing a deep dive today, looking at this series of articles called The Executive's Compass.
Yeah, it's specifically for nurse execs. And right away, they're not shying away from the tough stuff,
Oh, absolutely. Like right off the bat, they hit you with this idea of inner alignment.
which is so interesting because, it sounds kind of, uh,
Touchy-feely?
yeah, a little bit, right.
Right.
But they tie it directly to being a better leader, not just feeling good, but actually making good decisions,
Yeah.
inspiring your team.
And they give this example, right? Mark, a VP of nursing, super dedicated, always
A
available.
classic go-to person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But he's burning out, missing family stuff, feeling guilty all the time. It's even starting to affect his work, you
And
know?
I think what's so powerful about the way the article lays this out is they don't just say, oh, it's bad to be burnt out. They
Yeah.
really go into the
Right,
consequence.
like why it matters.
Yeah, because think about it. If you're resentful, if you're exhausted, how are you really showing up for your team, your decision making,
It impacts everything.
everything? And the executive's compass makes a really strong case that when you intentionally integrate work and life,
Yeah.
really do it in a mindful way.
You see the benefits everywhere.
Absolutely. More energy, you're modeling healthy behavior for your people and the decisions you're making.
Hmm.
Well, they're just better.
So it's not just about feeling less stressed, it's about being a stronger leader overall.
100%.
Okay, so how do we actually do this? Because it's easy to say work-life balance, but
Right. The reality is it's tough.
it is. So the executive's compass breaks it down into three keys. First one, clarifying your non-negotiables.
And this is where it gets, kind of personal. What really matters to you outside of work?
Yep.
Family dinner, that workout, just some quiet time to yourself.
But the key is you got to treat those things like,
They're just as important as that budget meeting.
yes.
Write them down, put them to your schedule, whatever it takes.
Okay, but then how do we protect that time? Because work demands, they don't just,
They don't go away.
no. So key number two, communicating and enforcing boundaries.
And this is where I think a lot of us, we struggle,
Right.
Because it means setting expectations, being clear about when you're available, when you're not, delegating effectively.
And sometimes just saying no.
It's hard. But think about it. When was the last time you actually communicated a boundary to your team? Not just implied it, but said it outright.
That's such a good point, and it leads perfectly into the third key, redefining productivity and success.
Oh, this was huge. Because so many of us are stuck in this mindset of more hours equals more success. And the executive's compass is like, nope.
Flip the script.
Yeah, it's about strategic efficiency, about
Mhm.
impact, not just how many hours you're putting in. Have you ever noticed yourself falling into that trap? Like, you're busy, but are you actually?
Oh, all the time. It's almost like a badge of honor, you know, look how busy I am. But this whole strategic efficiency thing, I mean, how does that really work when you're in a leadership role?
Well, they go into it pretty deep, actually. It's about being laser focused on the tasks that actually move the needle and then
Delegating the rest.
delegating.
Oh,
Or
getting rid of them altogether.
sometimes that's the best option. I bet there are things on your plate right now that could just disappear.
Yeah.
And no one would even notice.
It's about working smarter, not harder. And that includes recognizing that rest, taking breaks. That's not a weakness.
It's essential.
Yeah.
Like, remember Mark, our VP who's burning out. He's the perfect example of what happens when we don't do that. He's actually becoming less effective because he's pushing himself so hard.
So these three keys, they're almost like a roadmap, right? To help leaders like Mark and like you break free from that.
Exactly. And speaking of roadmaps, the Executive's Compass actually gives us a really cool tool to put all this into practice. It's called the Work-Life Balance Audit. We'll dig into that after a quick break.
Okay, I'm sure some of you are listening thinking like, oh, that sounds great in theory, but
Yeah, it's easy to say set boundaries, but when you're actually in it, in that leadership role,
it can feel impossible.
right.
Yeah.
And the Executive's Compass totally gets that. They even talk about the emotional side of it, like the fear of disappointing people, the guilt.
That feeling like, oh, I should be available all the time, or if I say no, it means I'm not dedicated.
Exactly. And that's where the journal prompts they have in this series, they're really helpful. Like, they really push you to look at those feelings. Like, what comes up for you when you think about setting boundaries, or what are you afraid of?
It's like giving yourself permission to actually acknowledge those emotions because they're real. But then how do you move past that?
Well, the key is you got to challenge those beliefs, right? Like, remind yourself that setting boundaries, it's not selfish. It's self-care.
And we've been talking about this, right? Self-care isn't just about you, it's about being a better leader.
100%. It's about showing up as your best self for your team. And here's something the Executive's Compass emphasizes. When you model healthy boundaries, it gives your team permission to do the same,
It's like it creates this whole culture where everyone feels like it's okay
to
to
have a
set.
life,
Huh.
to prioritize their well-being.
Mm.
And that's so huge, especially in healthcare, where burnout is such a problem.
It's like that whole saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. If you're running on fumes, you can't be there for your team, you can't make good decisions.
Exactly. And, I'm thinking about Mark, that VP we talked about. Him not having boundaries, it probably wasn't just affecting him. His team was probably feeling the pressure too. Like
Yeah.
they had to be available all the time.
It creates this whole cycle.
Yeah. So this isn't just about you as a leader. It's about the whole team, the whole organization.
Hmm.
It even impacts patient care.
Okay, so let's get to that tool we mentioned before, the work-life balance audit. I really like how the Executive's Compass walks you through it step by step.
It's so practical.
Yeah.
It helps you look at where you're at, figure out those non-negotiables, and then actually take steps to protect them.
So for everyone listening right now, let's do this together. Step one, what are your top 3 non-negotiables? Those things in your personal life that you absolutely do not want to compromise on.
And don't just say family time, get specific. What does that actually look like for you? Is it dinner every night? Is it helping your kids with homework? What is it?
Yeah, paint the picture. Okay, so once you've got those non-negotiables, step 2, pick one boundary you can set this week to support those things.
Think about what's getting in the way right now. Are you checking emails late at night? Are you taking on tasks that you could delegate?
What's one small change that could make a big difference?
Maybe it's turning off notifications on your phone after a certain hour, or saying no to a meeting that isn't absolutely necessary.
And then step 3, this is so important. Communicate that boundary. Let your team know what you're doing and why.
Be upfront about it. Because when you do that, you're not just protecting your time, you're modeling that behavior for your team. You're showing them that it's okay to have boundaries.
So I want to shift gears just a little bit here and bring in something else from the Executive's Compass that I found really interesting. They talk about leading from a place of wholeness. What do you think they mean by that?
It's like recognizing that we're not just our job titles, we're whole people with lives and passions and responsibilities outside of work.
Like bringing your whole self to work.
Yeah, and giving yourself permission to be human, to have bad days, to make mistakes, to ask for help when you need it. It's not about being perfect.
Which is so important, especially for women in leadership, right? There's so much pressure to have it all together all the time. But the Executive's Compass is like, let's be real.
Like true leadership, it requires vulnerability. It requires authenticity.
Mm.
And it requires self-compassion.
And it requires recognizing that your well-being, it's not a luxury. It's a necessity.
Yeah, it's like anything else that's valuable. You got to protect it. You got to invest in it. And it's not selfish to do that. It's actually essential if you want to be a good leader.
So if you're listening to this and you're feeling overwhelmed or guilty or like you're not doing enough, remember, you're not alone. And setting boundaries, it's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength.
It's a sign that you're taking care of yourself. And that's the best thing you can do for your team, for your organization, for the people you serve.
And here's the really cool thing. The Executive's Compass, it's not just about giving you strategies. It's about creating a community.
A community of leaders who are all trying to figure this out together, who are supporting each other, who are sharing their experiences, their struggles, their successes.
It's about creating a world where leaders can not just survive, but thrive.
And it starts with each of us, one boundary at a time.
One small change at a time. It's a journey, not a destination.
And there will be bumps along the way, right? There will be times when you slip up, when you fall back into old habits, but that's okay. Just get back up, dust yourself off, and keep going.
It's progress, not perfection. The more you practice this, the easier it gets.
And the benefits, they're so worth it. Less stress, better focus, better relationships, and ultimately, a greater sense of fulfillment, both in your work and in your life.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought from the Executive's Compass. Leading without boundaries is like navigating a ship without a compass.
You might be moving, but are you going in the right direction? Those 3 keys we talked about, clarifying your non-negotiables, communicating your boundaries, redefining productivity, they're like your compass. They're going to guide you towards a more sustainable, more fulfilling way of leading. And it's a journey worth taking, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you.
As we're wrapping up this deep dive into the executive's compass, I keep thinking about that image of the compass. It's such a perfect way to visualize this whole inner alignment thing, right?
It really is. And what they do so well in this series is, they show you how work-life integration, setting those boundaries, is just one piece of that.
Right, like it's part of this bigger journey.
Exactly. It's about self-leadership, resilience, and how all that ties into being a more effective leader.
And I think that's what I found so helpful about the executive's compass. It's not just about fixing one problem, it's about seeing how everything's
It's a
connected.
system. Like
Yeah.
you can't truly master one area without at least thinking about the others.
It goes back to that idea of you can't pour from an empty cup. If you're not taking care of yourself, you're burnt out, resentful. I mean, how can you possibly show up as your best self for your team?
And that's where this whole focus on inner alignment is so powerful. It's like
Yeah.
true leadership, it has to start from within.
From knowing yourself, building that resilience, and honestly, just creating a life that allows you to be well.
So you can then bring that best self to your leadership role.
And it's a journey, right? It's not like you arrive and you're done.
Oh, absolutely. It's
Right.
constantly evolving. But it's so worth it, not just for you, but for everyone you're leading and impacting.
So as we wrap up, there's this one journal prompt from the Executive's Compass that I thought was so powerful. I wanted to share it. They ask, what's one boundary you need to reinforce in your leadership role? And how can you communicate and uphold it?
Ooh, that's a good one. I encourage everyone listening to really sit with that. What's one small but impactful change you can make?
And it doesn't have to be this huge thing. It's about being intentional.
Right? It's not about becoming inaccessible. It's about being strategically available,
So you can show up as the leader you want to be.
leading from that place of wholeness where your actions are aligned with your values and your goals.
And when you do that, it inspires others to do the same. It creates this ripple effect.
So think about that this week. What's that one boundary? How can you make it happen?
We'd love to hear your thoughts, so share them, keep the conversation going.
Because we're all in this together.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. And until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep leading with intention.